Hey everybody, Professor Hill here. Today we're talking about handling objections, the fun stuff in sales. So, what is an objection? It's some type of concern or question the prospect puts forward. It's something that slows down or hinders the likelihood of getting to that next step, whether it's an appointment or closing the sale. Objections can be explicit, prospect tells you directly. Sometimes they're unspoken or hidden. Which is the hardest to deal with? Definitely unspoken ones. And, as much as they can be a pain to answer and can make you fret, you should expect objections. When you buy something, especially something important or expensive, do you have objections? Do you have questions or issues? Do you negotiate? Of course. So objections should be anticipated, expected, they're normal. You often hear the same objections, either about your products or about your companies. And almost every product, every company, there are objections to what they have. There are no perfect products out there. There's often something about price or performance, the features, the reputation of the company. There's something that people have questions or complaints about. Now, most salespeople hate objections. Why? They're hard to handle. And sometimes you feel bad or guilty that your product can't do something that the prospect may want, or you feel that it should be able to do. And then the hard part is if you have a struggle to handle objections, then you get scared of them, and then you have fear of failure. And when you get objections, the damn objection came up again, the one on price, or that we don't have this feature, you have a hard time handling it, so you fail at it. So you have to learn to handle objections and view them in a more positive manner. So how can objections be a good thing? Well, first of all, it tells you that the prospect's listening and showing some interest. If they weren't interested, they'd probably just be nodding their head saying yes, 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 trying to get you out the door faster. Objections about your product often tell you what you need to do better to explain it to them, to make them see the benefits. Also, objections tell you what's important to the customer and what you're going to need to do to take that next step. And if you can learn to handle the objections that you're going to get, and your competitors often can't, you're going to be more successful. So, what are some common objections? I don't need your product. We're happy with what we have. I've never done it that way before. The product. I don't like the product or service. I don't like the way you do it. I don't have enough information. I don't like you. Your last salesperson was a jerk. I don't like your company. I don't believe you. I don't trust you. Price. It's too expensive. I don't have the money. I have the money, but it's not worth it. Time. I don't have the time right now. I'm too busy. I really need to think it over. And then there's a risk, which is usually hidden, right? I'm not sure I really trust or believe you. I'm not convinced it's really going to work. And if it doesn't work, it's my butt on the line, right? It might be easier or safer to stick with what we've always done. At least I won't get yelled at or I can't be blamed. I'm afraid of making a bad decision. Those are some of the most common objections that you get. One way to handle common objections that you're pretty sure that are going to be raised is to forestall them. That means bring them up and handle them before the prospect does. So here's an example from when I was working with the AIC admissions counselors on handling objections. So you can imagine that some people come to campus for a visit, and especially if they're from the suburbs and not from an an urban location, they're concerned about the neighborhood. So one way to forestall that would be to say something like, being an urban campus, quite a few students from the suburbs and more rural towns ask questions about security on campus. Our extensive campus security system and good relationship with the neighborhood means that you will be on one of the safest campuses in the area. So we state the objection that they may have, and then we answer it. We're going to use a series of steps, a process by which to recognize, classify, and answer different types of objections. So the very first thing you need to do is listen. All right. Even if you think you know, don't interrupt. Use your active listening skills and really focus on understanding the objection from that person's perspective. Show attention and empathy. At the end or during when they're talking, clarify the objections with questions. You must be able to understand it from their point of view. If you don't understand it, then you're not going to be able to answer it to their satisfaction. Once you understand the objection, rephrase it, repeat it, show the prospect that you're on the same page. And in doing so, you may be able to reframe the objection, change the perspective of what the issue is. For example, if somebody starts off saying that the price is too high, and then as you listen to them, you see that they're really not seeing the benefits, you might say something like, so if I understand you, it's not really that the price is too high, but rather you don't see enough benefits to justify the price. Is that correct? And what you've done, especially if they say yes, agree with that, is now you've changed the focus of conversation away from, oh, your price is too high, but hey, let's see if we can find some additional benefits that we haven't discovered yet. Make sure you don't agree with the objection, but it's important for you to let them know that you understand why they feel the way they do. Okay, I understand where you're coming from. I can see why you need to have that clarified. Those are phrases you can use. Don't agree, but say, yes, it's reasonable for you to think that. Then, after that person has confirmed with you that, yeah, that's my objection, that's how I feel, that's what's bothering me, then you pause for a couple of seconds. Why pause? It shows you're taking it seriously, that you're thinking. It builds empathy. It gives you time to classify the objection and figure out how you want to handle it. And then if you answer too quickly many times, it's like, oh, I know how to handle this, I got it. And even though you may have a great response, because it comes out so quickly, it's canned or ingenuous. They don't believe you. It's not real or authentic. So pause to show that you're taking it seriously. It's important to you as much as it's important to them. So once you understand the objection, you've confirmed it with the prospect, so they agree, then you're going to handle it. We're not going to discuss the details right now. We'll save that to after we go through this entire process. But after handling the objection, right, then you always check to see, how they feel about it. Did you handle it successfully? Does that satisfy your concern? How do you feel now? Are you ready to move forward? Those are all questions. In general, whenever you make a statement about something, you always want to take the prospect's temperature. No mutual mystification, to quote the Sandler system. Then once you've handled that objection and say we're fine, change the subject, bridge to some new thing, all right? It may be to close for the next step. It might be just to bring up some conversation to change it, all right? And sometimes, usually when you get near the end in sales, near the closing, and people have an objection or they give you a couple of objections in a row, is to ask them if do they have any more concerns. Get everything, out. Just get all the issues on the table. All right, so an example down there, I have, hey, do you have any more concerns? Do you have any other concerns that may prevent you from applying to AIC today? All right, and then the good thing about doing that is surfacing all their potential objections is once you handle all of them, they have nothing left to stop them from going ahead with a deal. So we're going to break objections into three types. And where that's particularly useful is that there's so many potential objections and variations of them that you could never learn a particular response to each one. And on top of that, each customer or prospect is different. So it's better to have a system that you can use. And each type of objection has a different type of solution for it. So the first objection we're going to talk about is a misunderstanding. It's very common and it's really simple. Your prospect says something that's not true about you, your company, your service, anything that's important. They may be misinformed, they may have heard a rumor, right? They may not, really know what they're talking about. They may be ignorant. The second type is a drawback. So the drawback is something that you can't change. It's true. You don't have this. You do charge for shipping. Um, you have additional costs. You're more expensive. You have lower quality, whatever it is. It's something that you can't change about your product, service, or your company. And that's what a drawback is. The third type of objection is a stall. I learned it as fluff. It's just when people say something because either something else is bothering them and they don't want to say what it is. Perhaps they're embarrassed. Perhaps they're not sure if it makes sense. Maybe it'll make them feel stupid. But it's not really a legitimate objection in the sense that there is something really wrong. Um, we'll go over a couple in a minute. But basically, why do people do that? Hey, I want to get rid of the salesperson. I'm going to make something up. Um, yeah, I'm not ready to buy right now emotionally. I know one of the stalls I use if I'm looking at something in a store that's pretty expensive, and I'm not sure if I want to buy it, or I may be pretty sure I am going to buy it, but maybe not right now, or I'm still making up my mind. And a salesperson kind of pushes me to buy it. I'll say, well, I have to talk to my wife. Right? I may not have to talk to my wife, but I say that and they usually understand and I can get rid of them. Stalls and fluff come out when people are feeling uncomfortable, especially with risk. They may not be able to make that purchase, all right? Or they may not have money in the bank right then. Sometimes people want to avoid making a decision. It's a tough decision. A lot rides on it. I'm not sure which one to do, A or B. I'm kind of sure I want A, but I'm not quite sure, and they'll avoid it. And then sometimes I use it to cover up, like I said earlier, something else that's really going on. I need to think it over, which means I'm not sure I can afford it. So they're one of the hardest ones to get, but we're going to learn techniques for all three. And over the course of the next two role plays, handling objections and closing, you're going to handle all three. So, what if you get a misunderstanding? Using the AIC example, the prospective student says, hey, you don't have many majors because you're a small college, a small school. Now, before you answer that, you want to find out how important that is to them, if you haven't already done it. But when you first get it, right, you want to confirm that it's important to them. I see. Is that important to you? Now, the reason is sometimes people ask questions about your product or service and they just are curious how it compares to other ones. And they'll ask you what it can do or it has. It may not be important to them. They're just checking. So before you kind of try to handle it and start talking, just ask them if that's important to them. And then you can just kind of brush it off and say no, right? If it is important to them and you really do have it, you can use that to your advantage. There are three different ways to handle misunderstandings. The first way is just a direct denial. Tell them it's not true. all right? And you need to be ready to offer proof. So in your briefcase, whatever you take with you on your laptop, you should have, letters and testimonies from customers, articles written up um, about your company or your product saying how good it is, reviews, things that, you can support whatever you're going to say. People may not believe you because you're a salesperson, but they'll find a third party much more credible. So how would you do this? You might say, that's not true. We have over 30 majors and 20 graduate programs. Most students will find a major they want. Do you think you will be able to find a major at AIC? So when do you use a direct denial? It's usually most effective if the misunderstanding is pretty gross, meaning that it's pretty large, and usually it's negative. There's a rumor that you're going out of business. I heard your competitor said you can't do this. Whatever it may be, if you feel you need to respond strongly and emphatically with conviction, use a direct denial. The second one is an indirect denial. It just means that you soften your denial in the beginning. You offer more empathy. You allow your customer or prospect to save face. I understand why you might think that about AIC. We are a small school, but we actually have over 30 undergraduate majors and 20 graduate programs. Does that change the way you feel? You would ask something like that. So just by saying, hey, I understand why you think that, many people think that, it's a good way to answer their objection and misunderstanding without being confrontational at all. And a technique that's often taught in sales is called the feel, felt, found approach. And it works really well. And it's kind of used as an indirect denial in this case. I understand why you might feel that way. Many of our students felt that way before visiting AIC. After their visit, they found that with 30 undergraduate majors, they were sure to find the right major for them. Feel, felt, found. I understand why you might feel that way. Other people have felt the same way. You're not a weirdo. You're not strange. But afterwards, they found that, hey, it wasn't really true. The thing you have to be careful of is you just can't always use those words, feel, felt, found all the time. You need to be able to change it up. I understand, why you might think that. That's a pretty common thought most people have. But after they get to know us better and spend some time looking at our catalog, they realize that we really do have 30 undergraduate majors, and they're more than likely to find a major they want. So you just have to change the wording around so it doesn't become a formula. So they'll get used to FFF. The third way, and really the best way, if possible, to handle a misunderstanding is to convert it to a need. Find out if it's important to them. Is that something that's important to you? If it is, then ask a need payoff question to confirm their objection as a need. So you're really looking for a school that has a lot of majors. And then introduce the appropriate feature, advantage, benefit. So you've turned this objection into a benefit. So it's important to you to go to a college that offers a wide range of majors. Yes, I agree. We offer 30 undergraduate majors, so you'll be able to find the right major for you and start the career that you want. So that's the best way to handle a misunderstanding. Find out whether it's important. If it is, convert it to a need. All right. So how do you handle a drawback? Remember, a drawback is something you can't change. It's about you, your company, or your product. And again, make sure it's important to them. Understand the implication for the customer. All right. Um, and if you can, offer some other way you could provide the benefit they're looking for. So you may not be able to do it exactly the way they want, but if there's a somewhat reasonable way that you can provide the same benefit, offer it to them. If they're happy, you're done. If they're not happy, if it's unacceptable to them, then you're going to use the method we're going to talk about. We'll handle it as a drawback. All right. So the best way to handle a drawback is the compensation method. All right. So a drawback is one thing that you can't do or they don't like. So the best way to handle that is to outweigh it with a whole bunch of benefits and then say, hey, what's really more important here? What you have to be careful of is you don't want to argue. You don't want to say, hey, they're misinformed or this what they're complaining about or objecting about is not important, because then it becomes emotional and you're going to hurt your relationship and it's going to turn adversarial in nature. So think about it this way, and I apologize to anybody if I offend them, but let's say you have a friend and you're going to set them up on a blind date. And the person you're setting them up with is a great person. They have a lot of admirable qualities. They're fun, hardworking, generous, smart, kind. They have a good job. They're doing well, but they're not particularly attractive. All right. And so when you go to your friend who you're going to set up with this person I just described, usually the first thing they ask is he or she good looking? How would you handle that? Most people would say, oh, well, pretty good. He's not too bad. But he's got a great sense of humor. He's in really good shape. He's got a great body. He's fun to be with. He's generous. He's kind. He's polite. What are you doing? All right. You're compensating. All right. Yes, the physical appearance may not be their number one quality, but they have all these other wonderful things about them that you're really going to like. And that's how we handle a drawback. We say, yeah, we can't quite do this at all, or maybe not as well as you'd like, but let's look at everything else and then reassess or judge where we are. So, just to repeat, you find out what the objection is, and then when you can't answer, you can't solve it in any way, you say, hey, let's step back a minute. Um, let's look at all the positive things that we've talked about. We agreed that this product is going to help you make more money. It's going to make your employers happy. It's going to free up your time, so you're going to be able to spend more time at home with your family. So when you look at all that, doesn't it still make sense for us to continue to talk, for you to consider our product? And so what you're doing is you're trying to minimize, compensate for the downside. And in the process, you're kind of putting all your chips on the table. You're calling the prospects bluff. Do you really want to end this now just because of this one thing when we can do all of these other things? So in that sense, it can be a little scary, but if you can't, do what they want, you have to give them other reasons for them to want to purchase your product. What if you get the objection, the drawback, really early in the conversation before you've had a chance to develop any benefits to use to compensate for it? There's a couple of things you can do. You can ask them to hold that objection for later, promise that you're going to address it, and tell them that you need to ask some questions first to see, whether it is a good fit or not between, your company and theirs. Sometimes they come right off the bat. And if you can't or don't want to ask them to hold it for later, you can ask them, this type of question. Okay, yes, that's true. We can't do that exactly the way that you want. But let me ask you this, why would we be the leading company in the industry, even though we have that drawback? And of course, the answer is, well, you must have a really good product that overcomes all of that. And usually the prospect will say that, or they might say, well, I don't know. And then you can say that and ask them, doesn't that make sense? And they'll say yes. So they'll acquiesce. But that's the way you can get couple of ways to get around getting a drawback really early in the conversation before you've had a chance to develop any benefits. Also, feel, felt, found works well for drawbacks. I understand how you feel. Other clients of ours felt the same way at first, but they found after considering all the other benefits that they would receive that this really wasn't something that was a big concern. And so the product going forward with it still made sense. Something like that works. Just say, hey, I understand how you feel. Other people felt the same way. And when we looked at the drawback versus all the other benefits, most people thought that the benefits outweighed the drawback enough that they went ahead with the purchase. What if you get a stall or fluff? That's probably the one salespeople hate the most many times because they're difficult to deal with. And the key with that is to try to surface the hidden objection or the issue, because stalls and fluffs mean that you get kind of a false objection, or the buyer becomes really wishy-washy and they don't really want to tell you how they feel. So, and the other thing about them is they often happen late, in the sales cycle when people are getting closer to having to make a decision. They'll often stall for time or give you kind of an excuse as to why they need to think about it or go over things or talk to a competitor. Those are all stalls and fluff. So they can be difficult to deal with for sure. So one reason they're tough is that you need to force them to reveal it. So it can make you feel a little uncomfortable sometimes, and you have to kind of push them a little bit to tell you what the problem is, what the real problem is. So, for example, if somebody says they have to talk to someone or present a proposal to someone, you say, gee, can I be at the meeting? All right, so that's not a bad solution for you. You get to sell the person that needs to be there. Or another way to handle that is to ask them, how they feel. So if you were to go ahead with it, oh no. So I'm going to change that question. So what makes handling a stall or fluff difficult is you have to be a little forceful. You have to get them to reveal it. And so there's going to be some tension in that potentially. If somebody says they need to talk to their partner or their boss, you can say, can I be at that meeting? Right? Can we call them right now? All right. And if those don't work, you can ask them, hey, if you are making a decision by yourself, and I know you're not, you have to talk to your partner, your boss, I have to talk to my wife, would you go ahead with it? So at least you get them to make the decision for you. And if they say yes, then you can ask them, what they think their wife, boss, or husband is going to say about the product or buying it. And then you can work with them to try to convince that other person. If someone says they need more time, you have to say in a nice way, empathetically, so what's holding you back? What's the issue? Oh, why? And again, you want to give them every opportunity to get the courage to tell you what really is the issue. If they say they're not ready or they'll be ready at a later time, you can ask them why, right? What's going to change in 6 months, if that's the time frame? Or will you be ready to go ahead in 6 months? Okay, we can wait, but are you ready to go in 6 months? Again, you're trying to, as forcibly as possible without hurting your relationship, get them to make a decision. And you need to remember, you've been working with them for probably quite a while. You've invested a lot of your time. You have, developed a relationship with them of some degree to get to this point, and a relationship's a two-way street. So they need to be honest with you. You deserve that. You've earned that. So when you think about fluff, you don't want to be upset, but you want to say, hey, you deserve to know what's really going on. So What you do if you ask the person, who else needs to be there, why they need to think it over? What if you just get another stall? What do you do? Well, the analogy is if you have a friend who obviously has a problem, and you ask them what's the problem, and they say in a kind of disgruntled voice, nothing. And you go, come on, no, what's the problem? You go, nothing. All right. And if you keep asking them, they're just going to get angry with you. So what do? You might say, like, okay, did something happen at school today? Did you fail a test? Did you have a bad day at practice? Did you get fired from your job? You go through a bunch of things that could go wrong. And when they say no, 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 you've kind of eliminated these options for them. And then you can finally ask them very empathetically, I don't get it. So you can tell me what's the problem? And more times, than not, they tend to tell you because they don't like have that inside them. I'm not sure what to do, the risk, this or that. So if you kind of eliminate their potential escape routes, and then ask them in a very kind of nice, understanding way, oftentimes they'll tell you what the real issue is. So it might go something like, okay, why do you need to think it over? I just do. It's a big decision. I just want to be sure. Okay, I understand. Just to make sure we're on the same page, nothing's changed about how you feel about the benefits we've discussed, right? No. And you like the installation plan we've developed, correct? Yes. And the time frame's good? Yes. Well, I don't understand. What's the issue? And if you say it like that, maybe a little better than that, but if you use it with empathy and you have a relationship with them, and again, you've earned the right to know this, right? Usually, many times, they'll tell you what the real issue is, and you'll get through the stall and the fluff. What if they get mad at you or upset? What do? Well, you apologize, but you remind them of how you feel. Because again, it's a relationship. Hey, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to pressure you. I understand what you're telling me. It's just that, like, it seems like such a good fit, and I'm not really sure why we're not going ahead. Something like that. And if you just end up with so much fluff that you can't push anymore because they're going to get too upset, nothing's working, then you can back off. And usually you'd say, okay, I understand. Yeah, everything seems fine. You just need some more time. When are you going to make this decision? Right. And then, get that date, put it in your calendar, let them know that you're going to be in contact with them, then stay in even more contact with them. And if you think that the reason they're stalling is because they want to look at the competition, you can ask them, hey, sometimes when people tell me this or I get this type of answer, they want to think about it. It really means they're looking at some competitive um, products. Is that the case here? And if they say yes, that's fine. I wouldn't expect you not to consider some competitors. Can I help you at all with that process? And sometimes they say yes, but most of the time they'll say no, and you say fine, and again say, just to confirm in about how long are you going to make your decision, and then you go from there.